15 years ago, I came here to Derry area high school, and one of the first people I met was Chuck Smith. He was the custodian at the time at the high school. And one of the things that he told me was that he would be an important person in my life. And I was trying to figure out exactly what he meant, and it was true. Chuck knew everything about the high school, and he became one of the most important people that I relied on for years. I went to Chuck for many things. He moved from being a custodian to the hall walker and kind of keeping our school safe and walking through the halls. But I also asked Chuck to mentor many, many students. He has touched the lives of many students between basketball, between baseball, and really just being in our building. Students relied on him every single day, just for whatever his message was for the day, or they just looked to him for guidance. And that was the best thing that I want to remember about Chuck Smith. And I think he stands for what we represent here at Derry area, and that's integrity. And God bless him and bless his family. He is going to greatly be missed.
Chuck Smith was an amazing person, coach, mentor. When I started here as a new coach in a high school environment, watching Chuck in the halls, watching how he talked to his athletes, talked to the kids, how he treated everybody. And when you were around Chuck, you just felt like you were so important. Chuck had time for everyone, always. And right up until the last time I spoke with him, he's just, everyone should aspire to live the kind of life that Chuck did here at this high school.
My experience with Chuck was I coached hoops with Chuck for several years. He was the head coach and I was the assistant coach. We had a great time together. The kids enjoyed Chuck. We were successful with Chuck. And the main thing is Chuck cared about the kids, and the kids knew that he cared about them. So they would play harder, and we just had a great time together. He is one of my mentors as I was coming up the coaching ranks. I'm going to miss him, but I'm always going to remember the good times we had together, and I'm sure he left an impression not only on myself, but all of the student athletes that were lucky enough to play underneath him. Thanks for everything, Chuck. I'll see you again.
When I started my career here at Derry, Chuck was one of the first people I got to meet, and he was one of the most pleasant, nice guys I've ever came in contact with, and he'll be sorely missed because he was such a staunch supporter of Derry and Derry athletics.
Chuck Smith, my memories of Chuck Smith go back to even before I began teaching at Derry when he was the head girls basketball coach. I remember when I started at Derry and he became the custodian in the high school and continued to coach, that we would have a lot of discussions and there were usually a lot of laughs. And the one thing about Chuck was that he never pulled any punches. He always said what came to mind. I have a souvenir on my wall where he was putting a sign up and he drilled through the wall, and in Chuck's typical fashion he had a few words to say about it, and I went in my office and there were two big holes that are now two big patch marks, and I'll remember Chuck every day when I walk in my office and look up there at those two patch marks.
When I think of Chuck Smith, I think of one of the greatest guys that I've had the opportunity to get to know. Not being from Derry, I didn't get a chance to meet Chuck until I started as the AD at Derry. And from the first time I got to meet him, he talked to me as though I'd been best friends with him all my life. And that was just the kind of guy that Chuck was. Just made you feel like, again, you were his best friend and very welcoming. And that's something I'll always remember. Prayers go out to his family, and certainly Chuck will be missed by all.
Chuck Smith, one of the most genuine guys I ever met, and I'll probably ever meet in my lifetime. So many memories with Chuck. Obviously, being able to play for him in 9th grade baseball and then coach with him was more than a pleasure for me to be able to do that. Chuck was the type of person that no matter how distracted he was or whatever he was doing, if you had something to say to him, he would stop and then he would talk to you about it. Put his hand on your shoulder and just carry on a conversation with you and talk about it. He's the type of guy that you would be having the worst day and he would say something to make you laugh and totally change that day around. The things he's done for the Derry community, for Derry sports, the athletes who love him and flock to him always, that was the type of person that Chuck Smith was. And his memory will live on. And we'll miss you. Rest in peace, Chuck.
Chuck was my baseball coach freshman year of high school in 2003. He was a very caring person both on and off the field. Not only coached his players, but actually took them under his wing as if they were his own.
Yeah, Chuck was a real people person. He was always there for co-workers, and he was always there for sure for the kids, for his teams there. So, Chuck, we really will miss you.
I think people like Chuck Smith come into your life to give you a different perspective. Chuck was always present. He was always smiling. He was always there. As a coworker, as a friend, as a coach to the kids, Chuck had so many good qualities. And I just think about that in my life and try to understand and help people see why I stayed here in Derry, not only to work, but to live and raise my family.
I've been fortunate enough to coach college basketball now for 15 seasons. This is my second year at Seton Hill University as the head coach. And prior to that, spent 2 years at Niagara University as an assistant in Division I, and then 11 years between Pitt Greensburg and Chatham University coaching women's basketball. And although coaching college basketball has been an amazing experience and one that I'm grateful for every day, it would have been possible without Chuck Smith. I was a 20-year-old college student looking for a way to get into coaching and a way, frankly, to make money at a fun part-time job. And saw an ad in the paper for a 7th grade girls basketball coach at Derry and applied, and I didn't know anybody there, and played at Mount Pleasant but didn't know anybody, and got a phone call from Chuck, and then we had an interview, and he was gracious enough to give me the opportunity. Certainly didn't have to, and probably had more qualified people, but he gave me a start, and I stayed at Derry for 3 years as a middle school coach, and also helped with the boys basketball and baseball for a year before moving into college. And I remember Chuck fondly as I've made every move along the way. He's somebody that I've thought greatly about, and the opportunity he gave me, but more importantly what he did for people at Derry, students at Derry, and people that were involved there. And as Jimmy Lee Santarella said last night, he and I talked, if people only did have half the impact that Chuck had on the community of Derry, our whole world would be better. And everybody has been touched by him in a positive way, and he certainly will be remembered fondly. And we love you, Coach, and we'll think about you greatly.
What I remember about Chuck was when I was high school principal, Chuck was my custodian, and Chuck went above and beyond as a custodian. Yes, he did whatever he was told to do, and he did it well. But in addition, Chuck was always out in the hall. Chuck did hall duty, and he related well to the students and the staff. If there was an issue in the hallway, Chuck was there. He would help, and he would help get it resolved. Just a great guy. Also, Chuck was my varsity basketball coach back in the early 80s, and Chuck was the go-to coach. We didn't have the strongest team, but Chuck was always a great listener and a person that you could talk to if there was a problem on the team, in school, in life. He was a great listener. Chuck is going to be missed. Chuck was my coach, he's a colleague, and a great friend, and the school district and the community will greatly miss him.
Chuck Smith was a wonderful guy to coach with and to work with. I actually have never seen a person who could get everyone else in the room to just smile, and he would just light up a room. For example, just walk into any basketball game, he'd walk in the door and kids and parents and adults of all ages would just flock to see him, and he would just brighten the room, and that's what I'm going to remember most about Chuck.
Chuck Smith was one of my better friends that I had the short time that I had, and we just hit it right off the bat. And I always thought about Chuck, no matter what we were doing or where I was at, and he's going to be one of the guys I really miss the most in my life.
I didn't get a chance to play for Chuck Smith when he was coaching at Derry. I was on the varsity team and he was coaching the freshman team, but I knew a lot of people that played for him, and everybody loved playing for him. His passion for the game, but not only his passion for sports, but his passion for all of the kids that he coached at Derry. And the interesting part about Chuck is he didn't just love the kids that he coached. He loved all the kids that played all sports at Derry. He was a great supporter of Trojan athletics. Every time that I had a chance to talk with him, he asked how the season was going, and he also asked, more importantly, how your life was going. And he always had a smile on his face. That's something that I'll definitely remember about Chuck. When we tweeted out on the Westmoreland Sports Network Twitter account that he had passed away and put that he was a great man in the tweet, we had probably our highest, or one of our highest, retweeted and favorited tweets ever. And I think that goes to show the type of guy that Chuck was. He's really going to be missed. He's one of the biggest Derry sports fans that I can think of, and definitely going to miss Chuck, and my prayers go out to Chuck's family.
Chuck Smith, wonderful person. I first met him when he came to Derry, when he was getting more involved with the kids at Derry. He wanted to coach. I was the athletic director back then, and he first started out with the girls basketball program, and he was the one that started that program on its winning ways back in the mid-90s. And then he gave that up for a while and came back when they got into a little more trouble as far as winning games and that sort, and he helped pick that program up again. I also remember when he was coaching our freshman baseball team. At first he was the lone coach, and then we gave him an assistant down there, and he just loved it. He loved coaching baseball. I also played on the softball team with him when Derry faculty had a softball team, and good old Chuck, he would come up and he'd say, "Dave," he says, "I'm not going to let any pitches go by. If that ball is anywhere near the plate, I'm swinging." And he did, and he was a good ball player. And overall, Chuck Smith was just a great guy. He's going to be missed. I know I miss him, and Derry area is going to miss him.
Chuck Smith, what a great guy. I remember back when I was hired at Derry, one of the first guys who took me under his wing was Coach Smith, and he knew me through my father from whenever they played ball growing up. But being a basketball coach, and Chuck was a basketball coach, we would always share X's and O's, and every morning after one of us played, we'd always meet in the team room and go over some things about the game the previous night. And if he was doing something new on the court, he'd ask me to come and look at it. If I was doing something new, I trusted him to come and check it out for me. But one thing about Chuck was it didn't matter if a student was an athlete or not. Coach Smith was always there for every single person in that school, and he's just a great guy that's going to be sorely missed, not only by the athletes that played for him, but the coaches that coach with him and the community of Derry as well.
Chuck, I don't know where you start with the man. I knew Chuck before I was involved here at the school, growing up with his grandchildren, growing up with my kids, and we became friends that way. First, it'll sound a little bit goofy, but one of the things I was always disappointed in is Chuck didn't get to coach my son in Little League. I just wanted him to have the experience to work with a man like that. And I seen how he developed kids, and that's one of the things I see now up at the high school level. The kids, how they talk and respected them, the past graduates especially, how they talk and come back, and just talking to some of the ones that are coaching now and things. Just the memories, not just about basketball or baseball, but just in general, life in general, and how what he taught them then, they're really dealing with now. Just what a great man, and all the accolades you hear from talking to people, it says what kind of great guy he was. Okay? Rest in peace, Chuck.
When I think of Chuck Smith, I think of a gentleman that was so kind and loving to everybody that he was involved with. He loved kids, he loved being around kids, he loved coaching kids. And every kid that he had as an athlete, he wanted them to be the very best that they possibly could be. Chuck Smith was a loving, kind, caring gentleman, and every boy out there should aspire to be the gentleman that he is. Chuck Smith, you are going to be missed.